How can the city of Baltimore best leverage its heritage? Come on, guys, you know we gotta help Baltimore. Baltimore is Maryland's largest and most important city, and it's important mostly because of its history. This is a conversation with Maryland's colleges and universities about how to best leverage that history. At one time, Druid Heights was the county-city line, an area of high-density housing. It was the hub of commercial activity due to its location. We're talking about this area indicated by the yellow arrow. You see Route 40 is North Avenue, and at one time it divided the city in half. Speaking specifically of the opportunity at 2216 Druid Hill Avenue, I am Peter Brooks, and I am the second oldest grandson of Cab Calloway. Mr. Calloway pictured all the way to the right. Who was Cab Calloway? Cab Calloway was a bandleader, a musician, and an American icon. He left Baltimore in 1926, and in 3 years he had taken over at the #1 entertainment venue in America at that time, the Cotton Club, where he enjoyed a 5-year run before leaving for a European tour. He was the first African American to write a dictionary and to sell 1 million records with Minnie the Moocher. He was the first African American to have his own nationally syndicated regular radio show. He became a world-class Grammy Award-winning musician whose career spanned 70 years and included films, Broadway, television, magazines, and all the mass media. Calloway wrote that entertaining is his way of expressing godliness. And he also wrote that during the 30s and 40s, there wasn't a city or town where we played where we didn't break attendance records in nightclubs and theaters. Cab Calloway was known as the King of Swing and the King of Heidi-Ho. And not many artists get the title King of anything, and almost no one has it bestowed upon them twice. And as this video will show, he is a father of rock and roll and a grandfather of hip-hop. He was one of the first people to be rotoscoped. This choreography seems to come straight from the Baltimore experience at 2216 Druid Hill Avenue. To the left is Cab Calloway. In this video, he's probably 23 years old. The animation matches his body, and this technique is called rotoscoping. It's an early technique of animation used to, create realistic action.
He gave her things that she was needing. He gave her wheels of gold and steel, a diamond car with the platinum wheels. Oh, ski-bop-doo-dop.
Cab Calloway was an international sensation. He belonged to the world. Here you see tickets from France, Amsterdam, Australia, Iceland, New Zealand, Russia, you name it. Cab Calloway went everywhere.
I think if anybody started rock and roll, I did.
His role.
I never got credit for it. Nobody ever. But there was never been another one that come along, a singer that improvised the melodies as much as I did, which eventually wound up being rock and roll.
So when an architect told me that the city planned to demolish Cab Calloway's home, I immediately sprung into action. because I felt this was an opportunity for economic development in an area that seemed to desperately need. The city, on the other hand, had planned to build a park there. They were going to demolish the house and build some type of archway. The park itself, kind of dangerous having people come in the middle of streets and stuff. And just not much programming there. It was similar to Dizzy Gillespie's birthplace in Cheraw, South Carolina. And here to the right, you see, they destroyed his childhood home where he was born. And you just have no idea of who he was and his importance and what he accomplished. They have a statue for him as well. And I thought Baltimore could do better. Because here's like Mozart's apartment in Vienna, Austria. It draws 160,000 visitors a year. Why can't we have that? Louis Armstrong's house in Queens, New York, 12,000 visitors a year. And of course, the home of Elvis Presley, the pinnacle of them all, 600,000 visitors a year. But could that happen here? Economic development? Who in their right mind would invest in a place like this? These buildings are not only about to collapse, they even smell bad. This is a place where they burn buildings and lose hundreds of children each year to gun violence. It's a neighborhood filled with junkies and, as I said, houses that are teetering on the edge of collapse. Even the President of the United States called the people here subhuman. And yet, we know that when we destroy our past, we lose our future. And in fact, this is exactly how people lose all hope in anything if they have no history, no stories that they can call upon. And so I present to you that it is education which breeds confidence. This young person is not enrolled in a college or institution of higher learning. He could learn a trade or anything. If he were, he would have the confidence to get a job rather than doing what it is he's doing. He would have the confidence to be an artist or to contribute in some other way, his frustration, or get money or whatever it is he's trying to do. So we know who Cab Calloway was, and this is where he grew up. But what is the significance of 2216 Druid Hill Avenue? Here you see a screenshot from Dan Bell. He had 100,000 views in just over a month by going into Cab Calloway's abandoned home, which is about to be demolished. And that's what led me to believe that young people were really interested in this, because he was getting about 3,000 views a day. So this house is significant because this is where the personality of Sportin' Life was born. And Sportin' Life was a role written for Cab Calloway by his personality, by the Gershwins, which was meant to be used in opera. But the personality here, you see him pictured with Joe Louis. And Joe Louis was the famous boxer. He was the idol of the African American community. In fact, everything would stop whenever Joe Louis was boxing, whatever anyone was doing, and they would listen to the Joe Louis fight. My grandfather and Joe Louis were best friends. To the left, you see him being pinned with a rose upon arriving in England, and yet kind of taking it in stride. And this thing of being beautiful, hip, cool, the hipster having knowledge that other people don't, and this idea of otherness is what's born in Sportin' Life, which comes from that neighborhood. And the personality of Sportin' Life was so infectious that Cab Calloway became the first African American to have his own nationally syndicated radio show. Here you see a poster for it. It was called Quizzical, and NBC stayed with the show for a year, even though he never had a sponsor. And so he combined this personality. Part of it was a flamboyant style of hypermasculinity, which kind of contrasted him from his contemporaries. Louis Armstrong, What a Wonderful World, La Vie en Rose, Mac the Knife, which is kind of a Sportin' Life kind of song. And then Nat King Cole, who was known for Mona Lisa, Route 66, Christmas Carol, also at Cab Calloway's level as jazz singers, male jazz singers. Meanwhile, Cab Calloway is talking about a prostitute named Minnie the Moocher, a drug dealer named the Reefer Man, and he's telling people that the things in the Bible are not necessarily true. And so this idea of being the hipster, having a tribal code, even a language of cool and jive, and a generational separation, which is based on music and is often at odds with the law, kind of originated with Cab Calloway. And so I argue he's the foremost multiculturalist. In this 1944
well, if everything
video,
goes all right,
see the
which I
beginnings
doubt, Miss Walker.
So read this, write this, rip, pop, pop. Now you're hip, I'll bet you. So read this, write this, rip. We got you happier. So read this, write this, rip, pop, pop. Here's the spiel to help you. So read this, write this, rip, pop, pop. Oh, you gotta come on like G.I. You dig read me from me side. Oh, you put it right on the Lehigh. Then you can really get by, oh my. We got you happier. So read this, write this, rip, pop, pop. Now you have my bet you. Read this, write this, rip.
and at odds with the law.
We got you happier.
So the significance of the house is that the one location binds 90 years of American music, from swing in the 1920s and 40s that Cab Calloway came from. He lived in that house in 1920 to 24. It's there that he began to figure out how to make a living by singing about the life and people in that neighborhood using a coded language that was understood by African Americans. Cab Calloway gave Dizzy Gillespie his first job. Dizzy went later to become the king of bebop jazz. In fact, he left the Cab Calloway Orchestra to do that. Bebop used new melodies, beats, and of course improvisation, and they started freestyling with the music, which kind of led to hip hop. And even though hip hop is different from swing, many of the things of like the subject matter, the style of singing, call and response, and even the persona of hip hop artists really started with Cab Calloway in this genre. Hip hop combines the improvisation of bebop with words to tell the story of Black life today. And so they are understood by these general terms, Cab being the one who said, I'm going to sing about life in the ghetto. Dizzy Moore showing the power of the Black mind for improvisation and thinking, and then hip hop combining the both, singing about the ghetto and showing the power of the Black mind. And it's not to say that bebop wasn't about the ghetto, but it wasn't, overtly that, so. This set the stage for a certain style of entertainment introduced by Fats Waller and Cab Calloway, and you can see how Jackie Wilson, James Brown, Marvin Gaye, this sort of emphasis on bravado, performance, dance, magnetism, hyper masculinity, the ability to outthink or outperform an audience, do things that other people can't do. The other thing that makes the house significant is the fact that Cab Calloway was not the only one who lived in this home. Blanche Calloway's history is often forgotten. She was a resident there from 1920 to 1921 or 2 when she ran away with U.B. Blake's touring company of Shuffle Along. Blanche was a singer as well. She was such a prolific singer that the show would have her in the wings, even though she was 15 years old, singing in order to help the performance. Blanche Calloway was a woman ahead of her time. She made her professional debut in the U.B. Blake musical Shuffle Along. She introduced her brother to Louis Armstrong, who gave him his first job. She also helped Chick Webb, Cozy Cole, and Ben Webster, known as one of the first female African-American band leaders, the first female to lead an all-male big band on tour. Blanche had a very good way of entertaining. She was wild and wiry in certain things and very sensitive in others. And although Cab may not say this himself, his sister taught him everything he knew about performing, said Earl Father Hines. Blanche not remembered because she gave her life to God. She gave up the entertainment industry for her religion. Let's look at the significance of this house and Cab Calloway. Fondest childhood memories, strongest childhood bonds. This is also the place where he could be free. He had a similar lifestyle as Louis Armstrong and Count Basie. This is where he lived and learned about the sport and life, the place where he forged his personality. Much of his choreography seems to come from this area. It is walking distance to the Avenue, where he learned percussion from Chick Webb. His and Blanche's success as musicians proved the power of the Avenue as an important arts and entertainment district. It tells the story of a unique time and place and is one of the few authentic places with some integrity left from the pre-World War II golden age for African Americans in Baltimore. It's a time to celebrate this great age, this great victory, this renaissance. It provides a window into 90 plus years of African American history, music history, and the tension that exists between entertaining, making money, telling stories, political commentary, making people dance, which was the foundation of both rock and roll, rap, and hip-hop, stems from Druid Hill Avenue as the place where that energy was captured. And Cab Calloway translated it and was the first person to make a living from doing it. And like Mozart, at its essence, Cab's music is a form of children's music. It has a universal appeal to it. And so I've come to the Maryland colleges and universities to ask if you think the house should be saved. For you are the future of the state and the best and brightest minds. So what do you think should happen? Knowing that you've already lost the houses of U.B. Blake, Chick Webb, Billie Holiday, and the Royal Theater. So, the question, how can Baltimore best leverage this heritage? What do you think? You're the brightest and the best. How